Yeah. I love this little nugget too, on your show. So I didn't know you did this. It's a cool thing. I may have to think about stealing it because it's a great thought provoking question and neat to kind of think about passing this on to the next person.
Hello again, and welcome back to In Search of 42. I'm your host, Felix Becker, and I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide on this exciting journey to find the answer to life, the universe, and everything. Now, picture this. A teenager, uprooted from his familiar life, dropped into a new state, new culture, feeling lost and out of place. That was Eric Sardina, my guest today. But hold on, because this isn't just a story of challenges. It's about transformation, about rising above fear and finding purpose. Eric will guide us through his journey, from those early struggles to becoming an executive coach, empowering individuals in their 40s to thrive. He shares his own personal growth secrets, the pivotal moments that shaped him, and how he learned to embrace change even when it meant taking an icy plunge, literally. I want to challenge each and every one of you to step outside your comfort zone today. Do something small, something bold, anything that pushes you further into your potential. And while Eric's out there conquering fears, I want you to conquer that subscribe button on your podcast app. Hit that notification bell too so you never miss an episode. And do me one better and share it with a friend. We pour our hearts and sometimes tears into these conversations, and we'd love for you to be a part of this journey. Eric and I both love connecting with our listeners. Share your thoughts, your questions, your crazy life stories. Hit us up on the socials. Our contact info is in the description below. Now, coming back to Eric, this is a story about self-discovery, about finding faith in the face of adversity, and ultimately, about discovering your true calling. So turn off the noise, buckle up, and join me on this inspiring journey with Eric Sardina. All right, here we go, Eric. So awesome to connect with you again. I know I was a guest on your show not too long ago. That was a wild experience, and I know we connected outside of that. It's been fantastic, really getting to know someone who has really sort of a very similar lifetime as mine. So let's get right into it. Who are you?
Yeah, man. Great question. So that's a big question. So I guess I would start, and I'm a Texan. I'm not a Texan by birth, but I got here really quick. So my family moved to Texas when I was just 12 years old from upstate New York, Western New York, actually outside of Buffalo. And so I've got a deep Buffalo connection, a lot of family there. My wife is actually from there as well. Met her on a trip home. So a lot of still good ties to Buffalo, but really love Texas, love being in the North Texas area. I live just outside of Dallas and really, grew up here from middle school age on and I've lived here all my adult life. So great part of the country, center of the country, great cost of living, great business economy. And so I went into, after school, after college, went into business, went into finance and banking, and then into consulting. And after consulting, really into sales, right? So a lot of kind of similar crossover in industry, finance, and then into consulting in sort of the professional services, finance, banking, accounting space, and then into sales, and took a little twist into the world of healthcare. And so I was doing sales in the healthcare realm, and then elevated to an executive level over the course of my career, and had a lot of success, but ultimately was starting to feel like, man, there's got to be something more. Like I just kept feeling like there was something more for me to do. And so back 2.5 years ago, I left my corporate job to start being a coach. So I work as an executive coach. And I coach a lot of folks just like myself, people that have had a lot of success in various aspects and realms of their life, and a lot in their business life, but ultimately searching for that bigger question of why and purpose. And I help them navigate through that. And so I work with individuals on that level, as well as I do business and business coaching and consulting in the sales world that I came out of. So I do a fair amount of coaching in that space as well, straight business coaching, and executive coaching from a business perspective. And I love it. I control my control my destiny, control my day, work with clients I love working with, help people that are looking to change, looking to grow. And it's been fabulous.
And it's interesting to hear your story again and again. I mean, we've spoken about this outside of this conversation as well. There's been so many similarities in both of our lives. We had this transition at a teenage year. We went through a career that we both didn't enjoy all that much, and switched into coaching, amongst all the other little intricacies there as well. So let's get back to 12-year-old Eric. What was that transition like for you? And obviously, I'm asking because I was 15 when I moved from Germany to the United States, so that was a big shift for me. I'm sure that there's a big cultural shift for you as well at 12, even between Buffalo and Texas.
Huge. Yeah, man. And I don't know if I can remember if we talked about this offline or when, but it was a big deal. I was excited to move because I was getting ready to change schools anyway. I was at that transition point from elementary school into high school or junior high school. We called it in Buffalo. Here would have been middle school, and so I knew I was about to have a big change, and so it was kind of an exciting adventure. And I sort of pictured we were going to be moving to this western town with horseback riding and people wearing cowboy hats. And I had this kind of vision at the time. There's no internet, so your perception was based a lot for me was based on television or books. And so I just figured Texas, man, it's got to be cows and cattle in the street, people riding horses. It sounded like it was going to be a cool adventure, and it wasn't that. But at the same time, man, it was a lot different. So, and as a kid in Buffalo, a lot of family, a lot of friends, and I was sort of sliding by in terms of school, right? I was kind of like a C student, right? Just kind of getting by on being a guy and having buddies and just kind of doing the minimum. And I came here. I remember when in the seventh grade, my first year of school here, I kind of did the same thing, kind of just slid by. I was getting C's, and I was basically like, "Hey, I'm passing. What's the big deal?" And I remember my dad saying, "Yeah, but you don't have to just shoot for the minimum. I mean, what could you be? Like, what could you get done? How well could you do? Maybe try that, see what you can accomplish." And I took it as a challenge, and I started to just work harder and see what I could do. And I remember scoring well in some classes and getting some A's and some high A's, some like A pluses and 97s and 98s for average scores and things. And I was like, kind of got hooked on that. Like, this is actually fun to perform well and then get the accolades and the attaboys that would come with it, and the gold stars and the you're admitted to the honor society or the dean's club or whatever. And I thought, this is kind of fun, and having enough competitive spirit, it kind of lit a fire in me, and I became really disciplined and focused on being a good student. And the other side of that was I didn't have a lot of choices because I didn't have a group of friends to go mess around with. I was sort of a quiet kid, and I was a little bit shell shocked because people were really different. I mean, the accents were really different. The things they like to do were different. I didn't have that big group of friends that I had left behind. And I was a little bit like nervous or scared and in my own shell. And it was easy just to kind of revert to, I'm just going to focus on schoolwork. I love to read. I've always been a big reader. And so I, kind of went into a little bit of a shell of like, I'm going to stay home, read, do my homework, and, that kind of thing. And so, I grew my friend network really slowly. I had a few friends that I was really good, close friends with, but I didn't have that big group. And school became my thing, and then performing well became my thing. I think if I would have stayed in Buffalo, I don't know, it would have been a different path because it was really easy just to kind of be a sporty kid. I was into sports and just kind of be a knucklehead, hang out with my buddies and play sports and goof off and, skim by in school. It would have been easy to stay in that track. It would have been harder to kick me out of that track. Whereas jumping to Texas, it gave me a great opportunity to kind of change who I was. And I had, I wouldn't say not a lot of choices, but I was facing like, well, you don't got a lot of pals or a lot of other things to do. So you either just sit in your room or you can sit in your room and study. And I kind of got into the studying thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've talked about this before. This is exactly what happened to me, right? When I was 15 and I moved from Germany to the United States, it was a reset for me academically. I also was just sort of a straight C student, didn't care for school, just wanted to play soccer after school or video games with my friends, and this gave me a new opportunity to really reset myself and start fresh academically. And I guess I could relate to that idea that I certainly didn't have any friends here, right? I left all my friends behind in Germany, and I came here, and everyone here had friends since kindergarten, and I was the newcomer, and it was really hard for me to make connections. And I know this for myself that part of it is, I've learned this now over the years. I didn't know this at the time, but that I'm really an introvert. Which means making connections can be really hard for me. So I'm wondering, would you consider yourself an introvert as well?
Yeah, definitely. I'm an introvert with the ability to push myself to be an extrovert. Like a lot of my career has involved being extroverted, right? In sales, you're meeting strange people you haven't met before, being able to engage in conversation. And what I found was a strength that I could rely on or lean into was my ability to listen. My ability to care about other people was something that was genuine. And often, it was instead of being the person at the party that would go, tell you a million stories and be kind of the life of the party, I would ask a few good questions and then listen, and then have a few good follow-up questions that would show that I was listening. And it enabled me to kind of grow a friend base based on that, being this kind of empathetic listener. But it was really kind of an offshoot of being like, I wasn't good at the other stuff, or I wasn't good at the extroverted things. I had to force myself to it. It took a lot of energy, and it was more comfortable for me and more of a skill set to be a listener, be curious, right? And went back to the whole love to read, love to learn, those types of things. It's the same thing when you're engaging with an individual and a human, right? Is just to ask some questions and you get to learn, right? Hear from them, and so yeah, I'm definitely an introvert.
Yeah, no, and you hit a very important point. What I'm trying to work on now is getting introverts to recognize that they make great leaders because they tend to listen, and they really tend to take in with curiosity what other people have to say and think before taking any decisive action. You're spot on with that. So knowing all that, coming out of high school now, how did you end up in the finance business world? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's interesting because I had a really set idea of what I was going to do, two ideas that I was going to do, and I completely abandoned them at the first sign of resistance. Right. So thing number one was I was going to be a fighter pilot because I loved airplanes. I had all the books on talk about reading. Right. So I read all the books on airplanes. I could tell you the various dynamic envelope of what a jet could do, what the F4 could do versus the F-15 versus the F-14. I knew all the stats, and I built the model planes, and I was like, I'm going to be a jet pilot. And then I remember kind of talking to my family about that as I was probably middle teenage years, probably 15, somewhere in there. And like, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. And I remember I don't remember if it was my dad or who, it likely was my dad, was like, well, you might want to think about that because number one, you have to be really smart in math, which I was okay in math. I was pretty good in math. But you got to be like thermodynamics and physics and all these really high level math classes. And if you don't make it, they're going to make you an MP, or you're going to be in kitchen patrol, right? So you're either going to be in the kitchen or you're going to be a guard. And I was like, well, that's it. I mean, maybe there's nothing in between. I mean, and so I just kind of wrote it off like, that sounds terrible. Like, I probably can't make it. And I sort of wrote off my ability to achieve, even though I was a pretty high achiever, but I sort of doubted myself right out of the gate. And I'm like, well, that sounds like a recipe for failure. So I don't want to do that. And I didn't really like the idea of failing. I like the idea of winning. I like the idea of scoring high and getting that accolade. And I thought there's a chance I could just end up, peeling potatoes, I guess, in a kitchen somewhere. And so I don't want to do that. So I never really leaned in at all. I never talked to any recruiters. I never went down the path of exploring that. The other thing I was really set on doing was being a writer. So I love to read. So hence I've had some writers that I enjoyed reading, and I was also really into cars, right? So I had all the car magazines and car books, and I was just as analytical about cars as I was about airplanes. So I knew about cars, and I'm like, I'm going to be an auto journalist. I'm going to run around writing about car races, and it seems like a cool job. You get to travel, you get to drive these cool cars, and you get to give them back. So you don't got to own them, but you still get to drive them and have fun with them, right? And I remember saying to my dad as I got close to going to college, like, I'm going to be a journalism major because I want to be an auto writer. And he's like, it's a bad idea, because here's why. How many magazines are out there? How many writers are on those magazines? It seems like a really small group of people. And, I don't think journalists make any money. Like journalists, if you're likely going to end up being some beat reporter at some tiny newspaper in some tiny town for years before you maybe could get a crack at it. Like they don't just give those jobs away. So it sounds like a bad idea. Like, why not major in business? Because the business guys all seem to make money. And I think my dad was somewhat projecting, he grew up in just sort of abject poverty, right? Very, very, very poor, literally wondering if they were going to be able to pay their bills to afford food. And so safety and security and having kind of picking the safe road was the job, was always sort of the road he would lean toward. The other thing too is, my grandfather was a bit of a violent man. And so if you stepped out of line, you took a beating for it. Right. And so my dad was kind of raised in this idea that, you stay in the middle of the road. Cause if you go toward the fringes, there's nothing good there, right? You're just going to take a beating. And so he sort of played this, out of necessity, a safe life. And my dad's a great dad and still is to this day. In fact, happy birthday to my dad. He's 87 today. I just wished him a happy birthday before we jumped on this call. And so, great dad, but, he sort of projected this kind of safety need onto us kids. Like, hey, somewhat of a scarcity mindset, somewhat of that safety need. And I adore my dad. I look up to him. And so what he said carried a lot of weight. And so I'm like, man, that sounds like a terrible, I don't want to be some podunk, middle of America newspaper writer. I want to write for Road and Track magazine and be in California and talk about Ferraris and Porsches. And it doesn't sound like I can get there anytime soon. So maybe I'll be a business major, right? So I enrolled in business school, and I was sort of an undeclared business major for a while. And then I learned that the more desired degrees in business were either accounting degrees or finance degrees. And they involve math, which I'm really good with math, right? I enjoyed math. And so I became a finance major, and I got my finance degree and left college and went into banking, right? I sort of backed my way into it. Didn't really dream of being a banker, but I went into banking out of college, and it ended up being a great starting career, right? As a banker, I got to learn a lot of things. As a commercial banker, I was in the training program, so a credit analyst in a commercial lending group, and learned a lot about business and how business works. So it was great, but it wasn't a dream, wasn't a thing I was like set to go do. I didn't go pursue some dream or some passion. I sort of kind of backed my way into it, and then pushed hard to excel as I had become accustomed to doing and doing well at it.
That's, you brought up another interesting parallel in our lives, and that is the jet fighters, right? I too was obsessed with them as a kid. I had models just like you did. I hung mine up from the ceiling in like simulated dogfights, and I think I still have some patches even that I purchased back in the day. And it probably was also my motivation to join the Air Force later. But I realized that I wouldn't become an Air Force jet fighter pilot because I couldn't stand roller coasters, and I still can't stand roller coasters. So at least my plan was to fly for airlines and fly the big jets. But just like your dad did to you, my parents and my family and everyone around me really pushed me out of that idea. And I think some of it was probably motivated by the fact that my senior year in high school is when 9/11 happened. And so everybody said, no, do medicine instead. It's a much safer route. You make more money, much more stable. And so that's how I ended up pursuing a career in medicine that ultimately I honestly was not even my first choice. So it's just interesting parallels. But you had mentioned something earlier that I want to ask about. You said you had that fear of failure. And yet, before you moved to Texas, you really didn't care about your life. So where did that fear of failure come from? For you, what was the impetus there to change and find that fear of failure within yourself?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I don't know that I have a clear memory of when that sort of came to be, or if it just was accumulated up over time. And I've really sort of come to this conclusion that as an adult, that the fear of failure is fairly common. Only I think it's sort of a mask for what is truly the fear. I don't think we are so much afraid of failing as we are afraid of being judged for failing, right? So like for me, I became very attached to that, the accolades I would receive when I succeeded, right? I loved that. I loved hearing people say, man, that's great. You did so awesome. Gold star, special society, whatever. And when I wouldn't get that, it would be sort of disheartening. Like, man, I tried so hard and I didn't quite get the gold star this time, or I didn't get the A plus. I only got an A minus, or I didn't make the dean's list this quarter or this semester. And so it's kind of a bummer. And so what it really led me to do was to play safer, right? Like I'd rather lower the bar to ensure that I get over it so that I can get that attaboy than raise the bar and then risk being either judged or getting that, oh man, you came so close, but doggone it, you didn't make it. I learned, I grew to hate that. And what it did really was it evolved in me was to play smaller, right? To play more of this. It's kind of a scarcity mindset. And if I would lower the bar so that I could win the award, it felt better. Like I got off more on the accolade and on the award than on, am I improving? Am I driving myself higher? And I did that really, if I think about it, like I was a very good student, and yet I didn't take a lot of what they were at the time called honors classes. I think now they call them advanced placement AP classes, but I didn't take a lot of them because they were more rigorous. The students were a lot better, and the peer group was a lot higher. And in order to shine in that group, it would have taken a whole lot more work. And I found myself being like, I'd rather be the star amongst more average students who don't really apply themselves than I would be kind of buried in the middle ground or even trailing the above average students, even though those above average students would have made me better. I would have pushed myself harder and I would have achieved more. But it was the, either again, the judgment or the lack of adulation that would come from being kind of in the middle that I was not into. Right. So I don't know when that sort of took hold, but it definitely did. And I would say it's something that I've had to kind of work on throughout my life. And I've done a better and better job at pushing into what is now, a lot of people now talk about be uncomfortable and get uncomfortable and all that. And I agree. I get a little tired of some of the words around it sometimes, but I very much agree. We have to continue to push ourselves because the reality is, even if I set a goal, I haven't done this yet, but it is on my list to go, rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, which if you're not aware as a listener, you start on the South Rim or the North, but say you start on the South Rim, you go down into the canyon, across the canyon, up the other side, turn around and come back down, back across and back up. It's about a 45-mile hike. And a lot of people will do parts of it, right? They'll go down and go to the middle and then just turn right back around, go back up. It's, 18 miles or so, something like that. And so to me, there's more in saying, I'm going to do all three legs, or I'm going to go rim to rim to rim and fail and see what you've accomplished and then adjust. What did you learn? What failed? What do you need to improve upon? And then try again and likely succeed than it is to just go, I'm just going to play the safe thing. I know I can get down to the bottom and then maybe I can get a helicopter out or whatever, whatever the shortcut is. And then say, look, I succeeded on my shortcut goal versus let me see what I can actually accomplish. Let me set a big goal that's a little scary and really train and try for it. And if I fail, I'll analyze what broke, what didn't work, fix it, and then try again. To me, that's how we really grow as people. Again, it may not have as many accolades, but you grow. And I think you can draw internal satisfaction from that growth, right?
Absolutely. And it sounds like this goes back to what your dad was saying back in the day, is like, what can you actually accomplish, right? Actually trying to push you to beyond what you are capable of, or what you think you're capable of. And I've had that same realization in my life. I just like you, I was chasing achievements all along, the honor societies, the diplomas, all those extra letters after my name, the various colors cords at graduation. But one thing that took me honestly way too long really to recognize was all these achievements mean nothing. Right? It's not aligned with myself. Those achievements are aligned with what society might expect or might applaud and cheer. But what really aligns with me is my purpose and what my mission is and what my heart carries in this lifetime. And making that realization took honestly almost too long to admit to for me, because I didn't have people around me that would push me in that direction, that would ask me those questions. And so I know you're now helping other people find their purpose through your coaching, but how did you transition from the business side of things to the coaching side of things? Like, what happened in your business career that made you step out of that and into coaching?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one thing I would kind of adjust on what you said very early in our conversation is I really wasn't. There were parts of what I was doing in business that made me unhappy. And I would say that my last role, there was some things kind of going on within the business that made it very, very uncomfortable. But by and large, I enjoyed my professional experiences. There were highs and lows and goods and bads like anything in life, but I enjoyed it. At the same time, I recognized that like, what are my best days? Like, what do I really enjoy about my day to day, my work? And after working with my own coach for a number of years, kept coming back to my best days are when I engage with others on sort of a one-to-one or a one to a few level and share information, work with them to see them improve. And I get more enjoyment seeing them excel and then sort of being part of that as just the guy kind of in the background and seeing them achieve and excel than I did from being the guy out front and getting all the sales awards and the different, prizes or different awards you would get as a salesperson. Again, there was some of me in my earlier career, like the guy that wanted to get the A's and the honor roll, that was like, I want to achieve the sales goal because I just want the attaboy. I just want to hear that, hey, good job, you're the best type of thing versus, the money was always nice because I had to provide for my family. At the same time, I wasn't so money motivated, and it wasn't about, it was more about, again, the words of affirmation. It was about the, you're doing great type of thing. And then I would just move on to the next goal. Well, again, so highs and lows and goods and bads throughout the career. It was a mixture. But when I sat down and really started to analyze and think about what do I want to do, and I'll back up a half a step here. I think where I started to really question and ask myself a lot of things, a lot of these more introspective things, was when my kids graduated school and then moved out of the house, right? When they reached that age of adulthood and they both moved away, both of our two kiddos got their full-time jobs and they're now thriving. I had seen my role, my primary mission in life was husband, father, raise my kids, provide for the family, those types of things. And once that was checked, that box got checked, and I'm like, okay, I've raised them. My wife and I raised them. They're fully functioning adults. They're off working and providing for themselves. Well, now what? Am I just doing this to make money? Because I can make money and we've got money. We're not needing, we're not worried about our next meal or paying the rent. So is that what I'm supposed to do? Just keep making money, or is there something more here? And so that's when I started to, again, spend a couple of years working with a coach and analyzing and looking into myself, really for the first time, that I spent my own time and money looking into me and what was kind of made me tick and made me when I was having a perfect day, what did it look like? And if I had to sketch a vision plan for myself, what did my vision look like for the next couple of years or 3 or 4 or 5 years or the remainder of my working career? What did I want that to be? And that's where I started to settle in on, man, I want to work with other people and help them through these transitions in their life, these pivots toward maybe who they're more born to be, created to be, divinely created to be, all those things before life or different decisions got in the way and maybe led them down a path that took them off course through one reason or another. How do I help them get back toward their authentic self, right? And so that's when I ultimately made a decision to let's give this coaching thing a run, and let me jump out here and start coaching people and working with them one-on-one.
No, that's awesome. That's fantastic. How did you come across coaching for yourself then in the first place? What was happening in your life that made you think you needed A, help, and B, why coaching? And how did you find that for yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I love, again, back to the reading thing, the kind of, I still love to still read a lot of books. I've got stacks of them on my desk. I've gotten to where I used to I'm going to read it from start to cover, and then I'll start the next one. Now I've kind of like this crack habit on books, right? I'll get 50% in and I just keep going. I'm going to start another one. I'm into like 3 books at a time at all times now, so a lot of books. But then the other way I love to learn is podcasts, right? So I love podcasts. I've been a listener to podcasts. I used to listen to them on the way driving to the office, listen to them on the way driving home. And I had a few shows that I really, really loved. One of them was a show called Morning Coffee by the host was a guy named Rick Alexander. He's since stopped doing the podcast, but he was prolific. He did a show every single day. They were short, like 10 to 15 minutes, but every single day, new episode. And he would talk about some kind of life lesson he had learned along the way. And then after a while, he started to advertise toward the end of his podcast about this program he was starting called the Clarity Academy that was designed to help you get clarity into your life. And he offered it both in a group environment as well as a one-on-one environment. And you could call him, right? He gave his information. And I'm thinking, this is hocus pocus, right? This isn't real. Like, I'm going to call this number and it's going to be some bot or some, call center in some country far away. It's not going to be the actual guy that I'm listening to every day. I just didn't understand how this could work, that I could get access to this podcast host that I really enjoy listening to every day. But sure enough, I called him, he answered, and I'm like, holy moly, I'm having a conversation with this host, right? And it was kind of cool. And so we talked about it, and he offered me the different ways I could, first we had kind of a discovery discussion of what I was looking for. And he's like, yeah, I think I can help you. You could do a group setting or we could do one-on-one. And so I was like, well, I'd rather do one-on-one. I really want to focus on me. I'm not as concerned about what's going on in the group. I've since kind of pivoted a bit on that. I think there's a lot of value to be gained from a group and group sharing, group learning. But I also do love the one-on-one setting. So I worked with Rick for a couple of years, and a whole lot of learning went along the way. And he's been a great guide, a mentor, a friend now, for now since like 20, I don't know, 19 or 18, somewhere in there is when I hired him for the first time and started working together. And so, yeah, so that's what led me to understanding like, wow, I can hire my own personal coach and dig into me, and he's going to help me figure out some things. And it was great. So that was my first experience with it.
That's beautiful. And I think that's an interesting and a very important point to make as well, that these podcasts exist to showcase people, for people to reach out to, right? We want you to reach out to us. We're not just putting this out here for entertainment. Like we obviously want you to listen and get value from this. But if you think, either Eric or myself can help you, then absolutely feel free to reach out to either one of us, because that's also what we do here, right? We try to help make the world a better place, and we can only do that if you reach out to us. That's something that it took me a long time to get there, because I think some of it's that introvert myself and just trying to have some hesitation with taking action. But I started reaching out to other podcast guests and hosts over the last month or so, and the experience I've had from that has been absolutely incredible. I was listening to Jason Dree's podcast, and Ayush Gupta was on there as a guest. And Ayush is a physician who's interested in real estate investing. And I was like, well, that's kind of like me. I'm a physician. I'm interested in real estate investing. Let me reach out to Ayush. Well, I reached out to him. We got on a Zoom. We started talking, and he said I needed to meet this guy named Eric Sardina. And so, long story short, that's how we ended up here today, because I reached out to Ayush on Jason Dree's podcast. So you're absolutely right that reaching out to people on podcasts is a valuable lesson, right? It's interesting how the world works, but yeah.
You're saying that story, and I'm like, man, I know Ayush. I'm a great friend of Ayush. He's a great friend of mine. And so as you're telling that story, I was kind of laughing because I'm like, I know him. Then you're like, yeah, I know how we get connected. I forget sometimes how we get connected, because I'm on a few different platforms that help. And we haven't really talked about it, but I have a podcast as well. I think you mentioned at the beginning you were a guest on my show, and so yeah, and that's been a great project. I totally love the podcast format and being a host of a show. But that's funny that you got. I didn't realize. Forgot to connect the dots. That's how you met Ayush, was through him being on Jason Drees' show and that type of thing. So that's cool.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, no, there's absolutely a valuable lesson to learn. Do reach out to hosts and guests if you want to connect with them. Very important. So speaking of reaching out, who are your ideal clients? Like who do you like to coach these days?
Yeah, so a lot of my clients, it's starting to broaden a bit, but I would say a lot of my clients look a lot like me. So they're basically a 40-plus-year-old man who has reached some level of success in his business life, his family life, but he's trying to optimize. He wants to, he maybe is feeling a little disconnected in some ways, right? Like, starting to ask some of those bigger questions about purpose and why and mission and why am I here? And am I using my gifts or talents the way I was designed to use them? And searching for some answers. And so that's often how my clients come to me, is they come asking that question of like, help me figure some things out. And then once I figure that picture out and it starts to come into some amount of clarity, help me put some plans together toward reaching that, toward building that vision and helping it come together and hold me accountable to it. And so that's often how I begin working with folks and what their demographic kind of looks like. I have worked with women as well. I've worked with a few younger folks that were earlier in their careers trying to figure some things out. But for the most part, if you look at a bell curve, right, of what my clients look like, they're generally that kind of, again, somewhere in their 40s-ish range, starting to ask questions, having success in certain aspects of their life, but feeling like they could be doing either more or being more in alignment with who they were designed to be, who their talents or what their talents really kind of line them up to be successful at doing. And they're asking those questions. Yep.
I have a question for you on the coaching side of things. This is maybe a bit of a shop talk here between us, but I've had this discussion the other day with a few other coaches now on the value of predefined programs, like 8-week programs, 12-week programs, and I think there's some utility in that, in having a structured approach to your coaching. But if you truly go by ICF standards and how to approach coaching, it's always the client that brings today's topic to the table. And we're all square pegs that try to fit through a round hole if you try to put everyone through the same program. So are you more of the philosophy to have some kind of structure to your programs, or do you have certain highlights you'd like to hit in a coaching relationship, but it's kind of more free flow from session to session?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say I'm more the latter, although I started off more the former, right? So the way I built my initial coaching model, it was an 8-session model. And it was funny because I had this kind of presupposition that, people are going to want to engage with someone where they know there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, that they're going to be able to see like, okay, I've come to the finish line. Yay. And I've finished the race, or I finished the program. And the reality is coaching is so much more fluid than that. I agree with you. And what I would find myself doing is starting each session with, okay, I've got a plan, but what do you want to talk about? Is there anything specific that you want to work on, given kind of what's happened between our last session and this one? And, half the time they would have something they want to work on. About half the time they're like, nah, I'm okay with whatever you want to talk, how you want to start us off today. And so, but the sort of 8-session program that I had built really took more than 8 sessions to get through often. And it was designed to sort of be a weekly thing. Well, a client tempo isn't that structured. So sometimes it would be every week, once a week, or sometimes it would be once, and then 3 weeks later we would meet again because they would have travel or different obligations. So what I found is the programmatic 8-session, we're going to do this on session 1, this on, is sort of pointless, because really it does depend on the client. I can have a framework in my own mind of where we're going and where I want to help to guide them, but ultimately their speed, their tempo, their pace, and their objectives take precedence. And so we end up following that anyway. And so I'm getting ready, actually, the way my website's set up now, it looks like, there's this 8-session program. I'm getting ready to kind of de-emphasize the 8-session, more talk about the goals of the program and less about the steps along the way, or the session itself, the sessions themselves, because to me, it's not as accurate as what it ends up really being.
Yeah, right. And you hit all the highlights there from the discussions I've even had with other people. Is everybody's different. Everybody learns at a different pace, and I've definitely kept defining some of my own sort of more predefined programs that from week to week, some people are right on the spot and get to where they need to be within a week, but other people take longer. Some people don't take quite as long, and life happens too. Something happens and you get derailed from the plan. So having some flexibility built in is definitely important. So I want to paint a little bit more color on who you are. So I wrote a networking book a couple months ago that's really designed to figure out who someone is and not just what they do. So we all know Eric wanted to fly jet fighters, and is now a coach. But let me ask you some of these questions, at least, to get a little bit deeper on who you are. So who or what is your source of inspiration?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that it's my faith, right? So my faith, I'm a Christian, I'm a Roman Catholic, proud Roman Catholic Christian. And, I draw my inspiration from my faith, right? From my belief in Jesus Christ as being, part of a triune God of, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And the teachings of the Bible are sort of my North Star. That is something that I have been leaning more and more into. I'm born a cradle Catholic, as they would describe them. And yet I would tell you my faith really sort of took off in 2001. I had sort of this kind of reawakening of my faith at a men's retreat that I went to at my church. And it really kind of lit a fire in me. And at the same time, even from that fire, my faith has meandered along a very crooked and winding path along the way, as we will do. And yet, as I've kind of grown older, I would say my faith is getting stronger and stronger. And I'm leaning more into speaking confidently about it, right? I wouldn't have done that necessarily, especially on a business call or on a podcast like this, that I would speak about it. But it is absolutely the truth. And I'm sort of, my good friend, I don't know if we've talked about Aaron Guyette or if you've met Aaron yet, but he has a term that he says, I'm unapologetically Christian. And I would say I'm leaning into that notion as well. And I'm unapologetically, a Roman Catholic Christian. And so that is truly my North Star. And I take a lot of the teachings and the mentality around mercy, forgiveness, compassion, from a Christian theological perspective, and that we are called to love one another. We're called to forgive, those types of things. And I think often forgiveness and love starts internally, right? We have to kind of recognize first the love of God, and we're taught, right? That's a scriptural piece, is around love your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, and your neighbor being also yourself. We have to love ourselves as well in that mix. And so, a lot of my clients are dealing with some, pent up anger at themselves, or frustration, lack of forgiveness for themselves with paths they've taken or choices they've made, or others in their lives. They often can have a victim mentality of, why did this have to happen to me? And this person's been holding me back, or this, relationship did this to me and set me down this other path. And it's, so that victim mentality has to be unwound, right? And that's often by recognizing that all good things can happen, right? You can take a negative and turn it into an absolute positive. And you see that and hear that in examples day in, day out. People that have come through cancer, say, for instance, whether, I've talked to so many guests that have had horrible diseases that they've recovered from. And while they tell these inspiring stories of recovery, I ask the question, if you could roll the clock back and eliminate that negative from your life, eliminate that thing you had to get through, whether it was a disease or some horrible trauma, would you? And the answer has consistently been no. It made me better. Like, it made me different. It made me who I am. Do I want to go through it again right now? No. But I also don't want it to go away, because it made me a better human. It made me a better person. And so you can recognize in that if that's true, then any challenge we're all going through right now can also be looked upon with some amount of hindsight or perspective of hindsight, and saying, this actually might be teaching me something that I'm going to make me better down the road. So what is it possibly teaching me? Right. And that's to me, again, you could look at that in a variety of ways, but there's a faith-based, kind of a Christian, from my perspective, a Christian, not necessarily exclusively Christian, but a Christian outlook on that, of like, all good things can happen even from some darkness, right? God makes all good things, even in the things in the dark, he can turn them to good. And so, who are we to say, I don't want this particular challenge. I don't want this particular, perceived negative. I wish it were go away. And to be like that petulant child that kind of says, why? Like, why me? Why does this have to happen to me? Instead of saying, how do I take this ugly, nasty, gnarly thing that I'm going through and turn it to good, or reflect the glory of God in how I handled this particular challenge, right? It's a powerful thing, and it's a Christian piece, right? So it's a Christian process or thought process of always kind of finding that good, even in the challenge.
Yeah, no, I think there's two very important points that you just made. One is looking at any of life's challenges as learning experiences, and how can I grow out of this better? And the other piece is, of course, once you know who you are, and you know what your own purpose is and your mission in this life, and you live your life authentically as yourself, and you do good and be good in this world, you should never have to apologize for your actions to others. I think that's beautiful. I love that you found that for yourself, and are able to live your life that way. So, but in the same vein, then, what is your favorite motto or tagline to live by? You've mentioned a few, but what's your favorite?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess a favorite motto is, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Right. That's a scriptural verse. And it is true. And I tend to, I mean, I have those crummy days as well. Those dark days where you're like, man, why am I in this particular challenge? And then I can remind myself that I can do all things, through my Lord who made me, who knows every hair on my head, who designed me in my mother's womb, and who built me who I am. I can do all things through him, as long as I keep leaning on him. And so, that is certainly a favorite thing. I quoted one earlier: love your neighbor as yourself. Love your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's hard, man. That's loving my neighbor that plays their music too loud, too late at night. That's loving my neighbor that parks his car at the end of my driveway and blocks me from getting out. That's loving my boss who doesn't respect me or doesn't give me the time of day, or speaks ill of me. That's hard, and yet it's important, right? It's because we hear it every day, and it's recognizing your own failing and where we have failed others, and really wanting forgiveness of those failings, that we need to give that same forgiveness to those that have harmed or failed us. Harmed, and again, in kind of air quotes. But those are some of my favorite mottos. They're aspirational, right? It's hard to live it, man. It's hard to live it when the neighbor is blaring rock music at 2 a.m, and you're like, I'm trying to get a good night's sleep. I'm going to strangle this guy. That doesn't happen in my neighborhood, but it has happened in past neighborhoods. And so it's hard, right? It's a hard teaching. And yet I think it's important in recognizing, we're called to forgive, and we're called to forgive, because forgiveness ultimately unburdens us, right? It unburdens us if we're not holding that anger, holding that grudge, and recognizing, man, that knucklehead taught me something, right? Painful as it might be, that lesson is mine to learn. And it may be a lesson about patience. It may be a lesson, about peace, about grace. Maybe that guy's blasting music because he's got tinnitus in his ear and he can't sleep because all he hears is ringing, because he's a combat veteran and he's got tinnitus or something, right? Or he worked in a factory and he can't get the banging out of his head, so he plays music loud. It's recognizing that, there's people out there with all sorts of struggles that we don't understand. And when they react negatively toward us, we tend to take it personally. Like, go to a gas station and the person behind the counter is in a terrible mood. You think, man, this lady's always in a bad mood. I'm just here to pay for my gas and go. And yet she's always in a bad mood, always being rude to me. Why she got to be rude to me? I'm trying to be friendly to her. And then she's rude because she can't afford to pay her bills. She got a sick kid. She can't afford to, all the things we don't know, right? She got a deadbeat guy who just walked out on her. She's just in a bad mood because she's been harmed. And instead of just showing grace and being like, man, I'm going to just show love to this lady, even though she may not show me any back, just be happy and, kind to her and smile at her. Maybe it's the only smile she's going to get all day, because everybody else is going to treat her like garbage because she's got a negative attitude, but her attitude might be justified given her own life circumstances. So it's sort of recognizing, man, we're called to be kind to our neighbor, to our friends, to the people we come in contact with, and not just our friends, right? Those that we just kind of traverse through every day. That it's really easy to get in that mind of like, I'm gonna put my head down and just get past all these knuckleheads that are in my way today, right? I try to, like, an example for me is like, when I get on airplanes, I don't put my headphones on and dive into a book when I sit down. I sit there and I watch the people come down the aisle. And I'm just kind of looking for, is there someone that I can help, right? Somebody that looks like maybe they're going to have a hard time getting that 20-pound bag up over their head into the overhead, so I can help them do that, And sometimes, believe it or not, people they don't necessarily receive it well. I've learned to not just go, can I help you with your bag, and grab the bag, but, can I offer you some help? And if they're like, nope, I got it. Like, okay, cool. That's great too, but more often than not, they're stunned. Like, you want to help me with my bag? Because that's usually a stressful time, right? Trying to find an overhead bin and all this. I think, man, if I can just add a little bit of goodness to that person's day, I'll do it. Plane's going to take off soon enough. I can buckle up, put my earphones on as soon as we get airborne, but I don't have to do it right away. I think we've often find is people are just trying to ignore one another, just trying to, I'm just trying to get through the day. I don't want to deal with all these humans. And my thing is, man, I think we're called to deal with humans. I think we're called to make the world better by helping other people have a good day,
Absolutely. No, that is so beautiful. Negativity is incredibly infectious, and it takes a lot of work for all of us to combat that. And you're so right that unleashing that tension and taking that negativity out of our lives and turning it into something positive helps everyone have a better life. And I agree with you. It is upon each and every one of us to make the world a better place by spreading that kind of positivity. So you're obviously a very intellectual person. You've thought about all these things a lot. So where is your favorite thinking spot? Where do your best ideas come from?
Man, I would tell you that a couple places. One, running. I love to run. I love being outdoors. I love being in nature. I work out outdoors almost exclusively, right? So I either do boot camps outdoors, or I just love to trail run or run on the road. And so I do a lot of good thinking. And in fact, if I'm feeling kind of like wound up, like under some stress, or I can't decide, or I got almost some overwhelm, so much going on, if I go on a run, it just clears it out, right? I can really get focused on some things. I can come away with some good answers typically after a run, especially if it's a run in nature, if I'm on a trail run. That's one. The other is cold, man. I've really started to adopt the whole, what has become sort of a, almost a cliche of people doing cold plunges on the internet and social media. You see it seems like everybody on the sun's talking about cold plunges. I started doing them a few years ago when I first heard about it, because I had known about cold. My brother used to work at a health spa back in the late 70s, and they had a 50-degree cold plunge. It's the first time I had seen it. And people would get in that for a minute, and then they would get in the hot tub, and it was supposed to be really good. It's like a Swedish thing, right? It's really good for your heart. So I'd known about this, and I started trying it. I read Wim Hof's book about cold back probably, I don't know, like 3-4 years ago. And I thought, man, that seems like a real physical challenge. He's guys climbing mountains in shorts and boots, doesn't seem to be infected by the cold, right? He's swimming in ice and crazy stuff. And I always kind of ask myself, I like to do endurance sports and some hard things outside. So I'm like, I wonder if I could do that, right? So I got in and tried it, and fell in love with it. Just fell in love with the effect of it, how it felt when I got out. And what I've found, and he will say, when you're in the cold, your body's just trying to survive. So you're not worried about the mortgage. You're not worried about, some ticky tack, whatever health thing you're dealing with, or what. You're just like trying to live, and it gives you really good clarity. And I would say it's 100% true. So I love doing cold plunges when I can. In the winter, they're real easy to do because I have a pool in our community that we live in. And so the pool's not heated. It gets down to whatever it gets down to. I think right now it's about 47 degrees. And I'll do 5-minute plunges in that. And then whether I can do that or not, I do cold showers. So I'll do a regular shower, showering doing the shower work. And then at the end, I turn the heat off and I go to straight cold. I'm in Texas in the summer. It's not that cold. It's cool. Still jarring. If you have no heat, still definitely different than a hot shower. But in the winter, I'll tell you right now, it's definitely get your attention. I'll do a 3-minute stand in the shower and kind of just do pirouettes, circle around, let the shower, cold water hit me. And it's amazing. It is like a shot of caffeine. It will clear your mind. It will give you that, like it wakes you up, right? And it helps me to focus. So I would say those are two ways that I get clarity and get focus, is either running, endurance sports, or cold.
Yeah, no, the cold showers, you're absolutely right. I enjoy those myself for the same reasons, the mental clarity. And I mean, it's good physical, physiologic, and mental health benefits with it too. So there's definitely good stuff to be gained. So my last question, this is the oddest one, but I love asking it. Would you rather have a cat that barks or a dog that meows?
Wow. That is one, man. I didn't know where you're going to go with this question, but I would have to say a dog that meows, because I'm a dog guy. I love dogs. I assume the dog's still going to behave like a dog and be sweet natured, come sit next to you, let you pet their head, and kind of be. Dogs to me are servants, right? They want to serve. They're like looking for a job at all times. Cats are like the laziest creature. They're going to go hide in the corner, and they come out when they want attention and want to be fed or whatever. Dog. And I've had a cat. I actually had a really cool cat when I was in high school that I loved her, but for the most part, I would say I'm a dog guy. So if the dog's going to make meow sounds, I guess I'd get used to it. As long as they still behave like a dog, I'd be down for that.
All right, sounds good. Now, the last podcast that I recorded was with Kat May, and I started having this paying forward questioning. Every guest gets to ask the next guest a question, not knowing who the guest is, not knowing when we're going to record. And the interesting thing that I found is the question always seems to be asked to the right person. So what Kat May would like to know from you is, in another life, what career or job or title would you have that is different than what you have now or what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I'd be a pilot. I would say that in another life, I'd be one of two things, right? And it goes back to our earlier conversation. I'd either be, I would be a pilot. I would have flown in the military, and now I'd be flying commercial somewhere, or flying private. But had I gone through had that actually happened, I went through flight school and I found out I couldn't stand the air, right? I got motion sickness or whatever, and it didn't work out. I'd be a writer, and I would write for a car magazine. So back when I was a kid, it's interesting. Back when I was a kid, one of the great photographers in the car magazines was a guy named Jeffrey Zwart. And he's still alive. In fact, he is like a legend now in the car world for not only taking pictures, but writing, and then also racing. So he races, and he's quite an accomplished racer as well, Jeff Zwart. And so, man, he's like an idol. I could idolize him, the guy. So I kind of, I was so into him back in the day for his photography. And then, as you grow up, I lost track of paying as much attention to cars and car magazines, stuff like that. But now, as I came back to it more as an adult, or more senior adult, I noticed he's still around, and he's still now he's prolific and he's a legend. And so I think I would be, like a famous auto journalist of some sort, had I had a different career path.
Yeah, that's awesome. We obviously talked about this at length earlier in the show. So it's your turn now, Eric, to pay forward this question. So what question would you like to ask the next guest? Again, not knowing who that person is or when we're even going to record.
Yeah, I love this little nugget too, on your show. So I didn't know you did this. It's a cool thing. I may have to think about stealing it, because it's a great thought-provoking question and neat to kind of think about passing this on to the next person. So I would say for your next guest, when was the last time and what was it that you did that scared you to death and yet you still pushed through and did it? What was that thing? When did it happen? And what was it?
Awesome. That's a great question. Eric, this has been fantastic. A really amazing conversation. Where can people reach out to you?
So the best place is my website, which is just ericsardina.com. So it's ERICSARDINA, ericsardina.com. That's the easiest place. My email is there as well, which is eric@ericsardina.com. You can follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is just, again, Eric Sardina. And my Instagram is Eric_Sardina 26.2. Which is the homage to the marathoners. I do like to run marathons. And Eric_Sardina 26.2 is my Instagram. And that's also links to Facebook. Facebook's Eric Sardina. But for the most part, I pay attention to LinkedIn and Instagram, a little bit of Facebook. But yeah, those are the easiest places. And return to authenticity. So, yeah, return to authenticity. Yeah. My podcast is called Return to Authenticity. It's on all the platforms. And I do a show once a week and interview guests, and they tell their inspiring stories of making pivots toward their authentic selves. Fantastic. I've learned so much from my guests, and I invite you to check it out.
Absolutely. I'll make sure all the links are in the description below for people to find easily and readily and connect with you like we discussed earlier. Any last words from you for the world?
Man, keep pressing in, man. I would just say, everybody, it's a lot of tension out there in the world right now, a lot of negativity. I would say push back from social media if you can. We weren't designed to stare at little screens all day long like we do. Do your best to kind of put some boundaries around that, and man, find the good. There's so much good out there. Get out in nature. I would just say life is good. We can find good things. You just got to look for them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Just had a discussion about that very topic on LinkedIn yesterday with somebody, and I couldn't agree more. So thank you for doing this, Eric. This has been an incredible conversation. I absolutely loved every second of it. I can't wait to listen to it again during the edits. So thank you again for doing this.
Thank you, Felix. It's been a true pleasure and an honor. Thank you, sir.
All right. I really hope you enjoyed that. The questions that I asked towards the end are from my new book, The Simple Networking Tool. It's a great book that redefines how we network. It's all about who someone is and not what they are. So if you want to get your own book, it's available on Amazon. If you want to learn more, there's videos about it here on YouTube. So you can check out this amazing new social science experiment. I'm so excited for it. If you do get a book and you do start your own, please let me know how it goes and what your experience is like. I'm working on the second edition and I want to make it the best one yet. So be sure to tag me, let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching.